All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Katrina VanHuss, and this is Michael Wasserman. And my screen is not full screen on the title because I don't know how to do that. Sorry. So I just wanted you to know you're in the right place. We're going to talk about repositioning the revenue department for the content creator wave, and we're going to get started right now. But I'm going to stop sharing so you can see much more of Michael's face. Okay, here we are. All right, Michael, let me open up my chat here. Make sure we can talk to folks. Got it. Okay. All right. So what we're talking about today is repositioning the revenue department for the content creator wave. We're live right now. We're glad you're here, and we hope that you'll ask lots of questions. And I saw the registration list, and it scared me because I know there are a lot of smart people who have many smart things to say that will be challenging. If you're joining us live, we're going to put anything we reference in the show notes. So you can go back to the podcast or the webinar and you can click on it. And if you're listening while you're gardening or walking or running, which I hope that you're doing, don't stop. Just keep going and look at it later. It'll be in the show notes. The genesis of this conversation is that the boundaries between live stream fundraising and traditional peer-to-peer are really disappearing. The donors and the fundraisers, they're iterating faster than we are. We are hanging back behind them. And what they're doing in front of us is erasing the difference between these two departments as influencers become content creators who are team captains. So this horseshoe dynamic requires that we restructure the revenue department, and not doing so means losing constituents and losing income. So what's the history behind that? So sometime close to when Dirt was created, I started working in the social good industry. And at that time, traditional walks were on the rise. Relay for Life and Heart Walk, they were growing like giants. But lately, as we all know, they have suffered. But have they? Has peer-to-peer suffered, or have simply those walks suffered? Well, the walk numbers are certainly in decline. And the peer-to-peer top 30, for example, that the peer-to-peer professional forum puts out, it looks a lot different than it did 15 years ago. But at the same time, another kind of peer-to-peer was on the rise. And that kind of peer-to-peer was first recognized by our guest here today, Michael Wasserman. Michael watched the audience change over 10 years. He saw something in the beginning the rest of us really didn't see. And what he hasn't seen, and what we're talking about today, is the commensurate change in the way that we address that audience. We are using an organizational chart that, honest to God, is exactly the same one that was in place for revenue departments when I started doing this 35 years ago. And that is incredible that we're doing that in 2024. So Michael, first, welcome. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. You're one of the smartest and most interesting people I know in this industry. And I can't believe I get to spend an hour talking to you about things I love to talk about. What a job I've got. It's great. So let's not bury the lead, as my marketing guy accuses me of doing often. What's the problem? What is the problem, in your words, of what we're going to talk about today?
I think that the overarching problem from like the 30,000 foot view is that structurally we're treating essentially the new generation of peer-to-peer fundraisers and the new style of peer-to-peer fundraising as a new department versus an overarching strategy change. We're taking content creators, influencers, essentially at this point, people that use social media, and we're kind of relegating them to a separate category versus realizing that that is fluid across society at this point. And making that change is really causing a roadblock from, at least from my perspective, from a lot of peer-to-peer programs being able to really jump into a growth opportunity.
So would you say it's fair to say that we're talking about a very specific thing that's happening in the audience? And actually, it's not a small thing, it's a big thing. Like It is maybe the biggest thing, but I think it is emblematic of our resistance to change. Like, we're continuing to use a structure that we designed decades ago to address an audience that's behaving in real time currently and in a very different way. In general, why do we do that? Why are we resisting that change?
Truthfully, I don't 100% know. I mean, I think it's a structural problem, as you alluded to ahead of time.
Right.
I mean, some of the feedback that I've gotten over the years tends to lead to friction between departments,
Right.
whereas one department will own the revenue for a certain type of fundraising, and then another department will own another type. And as content creation, influencers, live streaming started to grow, that became very typically a singular individual, in some cases now a department's responsibility, separate from other types of fundraising. And it became a category versus a tool, which really limits the opportunity.
So is it like most tools when they first come to the market, they are the category? For example, the .com bubble. Websites became a thing, and then companies became .com companies, which actually turned out maybe in the short term to be really great, but in the long term to be a disaster. And with the .com bubble burst, is it a similar dynamic?
Yeah, it's similar to a lot of the shifts, even things we've seen over the last few years, like, people starting to move to things like telemedicine and just, the growth of different technologies, right? At first, it becomes sort of very specific and niche, and it needs, I mean, now sort of to go to your .com example, now if you don't have a website, you don't exist. And now at the same time, if you don't have social media, if you don't have a social media platform, if you're not creating content for yourself, your company, whatever you're doing, and now obviously for many people it's careers, for many people it's a part-time side hustle, for many people it's something they do for fun to promote their business. It's big on marketing. Brands are spending billions of dollars on it. So it's getting to that point of critical mass where it's becoming commonplace and mainstream versus becoming the niche concept.
Okay, so how does, and this addresses both the restructure, the revenue department, and the frustration that a lot of people who do what you do must be experiencing. How do we change it from a tool into a category?
I think one of the big changes is in the flow of how it's dealt with overall. So I think what is happening 99% of the time, from what I see, is as this has grown, you're asking people to either join a live stream or creator specific program, versus participating in programs and having tools for people that utilize social media and content creation. So people are having to choose, and ever since Tiltify was started, I remember having these conversations with, for example, the Relay for Life team way back in 2016, where we used to get tons of emails in our support ticket saying, how do I participate in Relay for Life using your tools because I fundraise in this type of way? And, that was never something that we were able to figure out with the Relay for Life team. And I feel like that is sort of a prime example of hearing from fundraisers and what they want to do and having them be excited to fundraise for you and essentially declining them and saying, you have to fundraise for this program only. I don't know that there's another type of program right now where we relegate people to only doing a specific type of peer-to-peer fundraising. And we still to this day get emails saying, hey, how do I connect the page they gave me on so-and-so platform to my Tiltify because I'm doing the Boston Marathon? Or how do I connect this to that? Because, the tools for most fundraising platforms, which is one of the reasons why we created Tiltify the way we did, hasn't really changed since like 2009, since a lot of the platforms started being created, right? There's still kind of a mailbox concept where they're a donate button, some text, and a picture, and that's really the function of them. They're to drop off money. Whereas when we created Tiltify, we created it for this specific purpose of seeing the content creation and the live stream commonplace grow, and created interaction. And that interaction is, I think, how everyone communicates now and everyone functions on the internet. And that's an important part of fundraising. But most platforms, most of the advances they've made are not to the fundraiser, but they've done a lot of cool things for the charities, saying, okay, I'll get you more data, or I'll get you AI, or I'll get you more analytics, which is fine and great. But the fundraiser tools for most of those platforms are still back in 2009. So fundraisers are now saying, well, I want to use this new stuff. And charities are essentially saying, you can, but you can only do it for this program.
Interesting. That's like publishing a phone number, and then publishing a different number for cell phone users versus hardline users. It's really
it's exactly what's happening. Yeah.
Interesting. So department design follows the dynamic that you just described, separating those people, keeping them from the tools they want.
Yes, because and we, again, hear this a lot is, well, that's a different department. Or even, years ago, we, from 2020 to last year, we were the donation technology for TikTok, for example. And that, interestingly, a lot of conversations I had with charities caused a lot of internal friction, because Tiltify for a lot of charities was owned by whoever was running influencers or live streamers or content creators. And there was a different department that was doing things like Facebook and potentially TikTok and other social media fundraising, which is a different category to many charities. So there was a little bit of butting heads when, in order to fundraise on TikTok, you had to use Tiltify, because that, again, was a different department and someone else's, I assume, like budget and revenue goals that was going to somebody else, versus obviously in an ideal world working as a cohesive team.
What do you guess are the barriers to stripping down the departments and rebuilding them in response to what you're describing, to the desires and needs of the constituents? I'm going to ask you this question like 8 different ways, because I'm just going to find the answer today, because I've been looking for the answer. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, all peer-to-peer fundraising should be under one umbrella, right? If it's peer-to-peer, it should be under an umbrella, and you should look at all the strategies that lead up to peer-to-peer. Obviously, there's different strategies inside of that. There's the people who specialize in walks, but instead of that being a silo of walk fundraising, and then it's like digital fundraising and creator fundraising, these should all be similar and the same thing. Everything that falls under that, to me, should be together, so that that department is working together, instead of, in a way, pitting the departments against each other, where you're potentially stealing revenue from one or the other to do it. And then that way, ideally, when people join a peer-to-peer, even if you still want to use multiple platforms, you give people the choice of the tool, not force them into a choice of the program.
So you're saying, as an example, if I were a cyclist, I would not, and I'm a cyclist, and I have a community that I've built around my cycling. I regularly post content on a variety of platforms, social media platforms. You're saying that I am limited in my ability to bring my community along by the tools that are offered me as a cyclist. Instead, I might say, well, that I can't leverage for fundraising purposes the community I have, because I don't have the tools to do it. So instead of signing up on the typical platform, I'm going to go to Tiltify and lobby to be able to fundraise there so that I can deploy these tools against the audience that I already have built. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, essentially they're saying, if you want to leverage your tools, you have to go over here and essentially join whatever program we have on Tiltify. And then sort of try to see if you can be on the leaderboard or connect to the cycling account because you want to be part of that group and community and on that leaderboard.
Yeah.
But you're utilizing tools that, in my opinion, should be everywhere anyway. I mean, to me, the reason why fundraisers on the platform are raising more per peer-to-peer fundraiser than other platforms is because of the tools. But essentially, it's relegating you to say and I've literally had that conversation. I was on a meeting a month ago where that was I literally had to take a meeting with a charity because somebody who was considered a content creator wanted to raise money for a particular program, actually for a walk for a charity. And I literally had to take a meeting with that person's manager and the charity to talk about how they would be able to use Tiltify to fund. It literally had to become a meeting, which happens very often instead of them just being able to do it.
So tell me about when people get what they want, when fundraisers get what they want, which I acknowledge, and I'm sure half the people listening now or later are going, that's a massive pain in the butt that you just described, Michael Wasserman, where I've got data coming in from 2 directions or 3 or 4 directions. But again, you're talking about the satisfaction and the productivity of the fundraiser, not the ease of lifestyle or analytics for the professional in the room, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about the fundraising. Literally how Tiltify exists is by fundraiser demand. I mean, most of the charities that joined Tiltify, at least at first, had no idea who we were or why they were joining us. But some fundraisers said, I'm only fundraising for you if you use this platform so I could use these tools. That's literally how probably 5 out of the 6,000, if not more, of the charities that use Tiltify ended up joining Tiltify. And even with that demand, it's still a very difficult. It's a difficult structure for those fundraisers to continue to support those charities the way they want.
And what's difficult about it? The fact that they don't fit with the rest of the program?
The fact that they still get relegated to a live stream program or a fundraising program, especially when 10 years ago, maybe a lot of them did that. Now, a lot of them are no, I want to do the walk or the run or be involved in this other type of program of, skydiving or whatever it is. And I want to support this specific thing, but I have to do it separately, which is frustrating. And you're making the fundraiser do a lot more work to try and convince you to let them fundraise for you and make more money, which I think is obviously counterproductive.
Yeah. So talk about the differences in behavior for the people. And granted, they've got to be highly motivated to even think about, well, I want a different platform than the one that my nonprofit signed up for or has available for me. So they're highly motivated. They come to your platform. What is their behavior and their level of fundraising versus the typical?
I mean, so typically they'll leverage their community on whatever platform, whether it's Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, X, they'll leverage their online community. They'll use a lot of our interactive tools to sort of have more of a conversation with their community to be able to fundraise. And they'll, want to make a moment out of the fundraiser, and they'll want to talk about it publicly. And they'll typically raise, I think our average this year is about year to date is about $1,250 per fundraiser, which is up $100 on last year as an average. Which is, from what I understand from other platforms, is much higher than the typical peer-to-peer fundraiser. And that's been about, our average has been over 1,000 pretty much since we started tracking it in like 2018. So we've always had a relatively high average. The other thing that's interesting from an average perspective is that usually makes up about 27 to 29 donations. So we typically see smaller dollar donations, but more volume. Whereas statistically, other peer-to-peer fundraisers get higher level donations and usually under 10 donations per fundraiser.
Do you think that is a reflection of the fact that the people who are coming to use your platform typically have an online community built? It's pretty big, so they're getting donations from a larger group, but in smaller amounts.
Yes and no. So in some instances, obviously, the people who have those audience, but we see people who have an audience base of 100 followers still hit numbers like that and close to that. It's because of the type of engagement they have. It's sort of like having an extension to your family and friends, right? You have the people that follow you on your social channels, which could all be family and friends, but typically you have this whole group of people. I think we talked about on the last webinar that we did. You have these 200 million plus people who now have additional followers who follow them for some sort of interesting content that they may create, whether it's entertainment or informational. So leveraging those people and the relationship they have with those people, it's not really about numbers. I think a lot of people make the mistake of only looking at what I'll call the celebrity layer of influencers and creators, where they're only looking for the best of the best, which is the equivalent of trying to get a celebrity to come and do your event. Obviously, those people are different, but that's not the mass opportunity and the bread and butter of what you're trying to get.
So that's interesting. I was talking to a friend, Kevin McMahon. He's at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and he said almost exactly that. He said, we're not offering content creators the opportunity very well. We always look towards how large is their reach, but what's more important is the level of engagement of that small content creator community. That's what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually, I mean, I've actually haven't analyzed this in a while. I did many years ago, but I'm 100% certain it's the same. If you analyzed fundraising statistics of content creators by audience size, you will realize that it doesn't go up the way you would think it would be from size of audience. It's really an engagement metric, and many people with smaller communities that are closer to their communities outraise people with larger communities where they're viewed more casually than people that have a really bought in audience.
Love it. Love it. Now, we talked about in the last webinar, which I encourage folks to go listen to or watch, who wants to watch a webinar? Am I right? Yeah. Okay. So we talked about influencers and like, what are they? And accepting people like Gamers Outreach and Dave Frazier, who does a wonderful job deploying pretty high level influencers. Talk about, just super briefly, what's an influencer and what the opportunity is in terms of low-level influencers.
Sure. So, I mean, I generally consider an influencer anybody who influences other people, right? Just on a very basic level. I think some people tend to think of influencers as the higher level version of creators. But when I talk about it, I'm sort of using those words interchangeably, right? Someone who influences other people, those people typically create content. So, and there's micro influencers, nano influencers. I mean, they're all part of the same spectrum. And really the opportunity is not to try to go out one by one to get people. It's like, imagine for your run walk trying to email one person at a time that you heard walks, and trying to get them to do your run walk, how time consuming and difficult that would be, versus mass marketing and creating programs that invite these people to run, which is how typically people get to these programs. So I think, that's a lot of times the disconnect in when people think about the creator influencer space versus, in my opinion, the reality of what it is. I mean, Tiltify as a platform, I think you mentioned this in your blog, this year to date, we're up about 55% year over year in fundraising. And I obviously don't know what the market is, but we continue to see more and more demand of people. And with that, I obviously can't show you our support tickets and the emails I get, but the amount of emails I still get and the amount of support tickets we still get of how people ask to connect to a page on another platform, or or asking us how they can participate, or to help them, talk to a charity about participating in something, is like, just shows me that there's definitely continues to be a bit of a disconnect there, in order to get that done.
So here's a conversation I've been trying to open with different nonprofits that I work for and want to work for, and it's a conversation that links that poor small set of people who are off in the corner doing live stream fundraising, trying to recruit high level influencers, and the legacy peer-to-peer walk program. And it baffles me why they are two separate things. I don't understand it, because they are both trying to do almost exactly the same thing. The live stream people, they do, in my experience, have a predisposition to believe, because this is where we started, that I can only recruit high level influencers. To your point, it's drudgery, person by person, email by email, DM by DM, and trying to cultivate. They are basically major donors, right? We're giving them that experience, but that has not proven to be scalable. And in fact, we're seeing departments getting shut down with that. And that's a shame, because there's a skill set over there that if we just took it over, the legacy peer-to-peer program could really be positive, but that doesn't happen. When I have conversations with the legacy peer-to-peer people, they have no idea what I'm talking about. They have no idea that those people could be helpful to them and could start a whole new thing. Is that just because they're in different departments? Is that because they're different generations? The live stream gaming people also can't have a conversation with peer-to-peer people, because I think the live stream gaming people understand community so well that it's unspoken for them. Whereas the peer-to-peer community, legacy, they don't really understand it that well. They just don't. Critique what I just said.
At the end of the day, I don't know what the actual reasoning. I mean, it's something that I've spent years trying to figure out. And what I think is the underused resource is charities started to hire people who understand community, but they put those people in a very specific hole, and said, your job is to essentially one by one reach out to these other potential community people, create a program that's specific to them, and keep them in their own department. But what that doesn't account for, which there's a mountain of evidence to support, is that those people don't want to just fundraise in a content creator program. I mean, when you think about it from a practical standpoint, what is a content creator program? What is a live stream program? It's not a challenge. It's not particularly exciting. There's no I'm trying to accomplish anything, psychologically. And I know you've studied this, why do people like doing physical challenges for charity, right? They feel like they have to sweat and bleed a little bit sometimes for charity, and they like that challenge. But in the content space, where people like to make content about going through challenges, which we see more and more of, people are denying them the ability to do that. In the last couple of years, we've seen an enormous shift of people in the content creator, gaming, whatever you would categorize as that space, refuse to do standard play game stream for charity and be like, no, I want to create a gala. I want to do an auction. I want to, IRL, stream myself doing a run. I want to, train for a boxing match. I want to, they want to create content because you remember their job or hobby or part-time job is creating content. So you're not giving them the opportunity to create content about a program that you might have that's really interesting and exciting and is actually about content.
Yeah.
But you're not allowing the content people. I remember I was in London a couple months ago and I met with a lot of amazing charities there. And a lot of them sort of showed me their programs. And one of them I was at showed me that they had a totally separate program of people that were skydiving. And I'm like, why aren't you letting the people that that are content creators and influencers participate in the skydiving program? That's content. That gives them something to make content about. That gives them something to put on their channel. And also the thing to remember about content creators is they have audiences. So they're telling and teaching their audiences about your charity. So to me, it's a win-win. It's not just the money, but they're also creating awareness. And a lot of times, my other thing that I'll just throw in that I find sometimes a missed opportunity is sometimes I'll put it together myself out of frustration, will see a big win for a charity that'll raise hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars with an influencer through a particular program and still not categorize that. And one of the examples that I give about that is, when you have an influencer fundraising, let's say they live stream and they're live streaming, and let's say they're live streaming and they're being watched concurrently by 40,000 people, right? Which I've seen. Well, the program that they're in is a live stream program in this example, which is common. So, but the idea that the people that are watching them are also live streamers is low, right? So if those live streamers, if those viewers want to participate alongside the person they're a fan of, they can't because they're not also going to live stream. So if the program that person's a part of is just a live stream program, they can't participate. So now you're losing all of these potential people that could sign up for something if it was something accessible, but you're not, you're cutting them off, and you're basically taking the money at that point and then sort of losing all your momentum by not adapting that as part of a program that all their viewers could become potential fundraisers of a wider program.
That is a beautiful thing you just described, which is why I didn't interrupt you. You know how much I love interrupting you and my husband. I love interrupting you both so much. So let me ask you another question. Here's a situation. So I got a board member, and my board member is a content creator or wants to be. And so they try and figure out, how do I do this? Where do I do this? And they start raising money, and they finally get to your platform like, I need an account so that I can raise money using the content creator tools that Tiltify offers me, which I can't seem to get anywhere else. And I'm not a cyclist. I don't want to do a walk. I am the best mushroom grower in North America, and that's what I want to talk about. Where would that money land?
You mean from a departmental revenue side?
Yeah.
I mean, at least from the conversations I had, that would land in the content creator gaming bucket.
That would be in your ideal world, right?
Oh, you mean no, where it lands now?
Yeah, now it's a problem. Now
in my ideal world, that should land in the overall peer-to-peer fundraising revenue space.
Yeah.
It's so that people aren't. I think the problem is the competition between departments, whereas you're using up our walk budget, we're using up your digital this budget, we're using up your creator budget, whereas they can all. We've gone so far. It's like having a different bucket for people that watch streaming services like Netflix versus people that still watch cable. Or people that use smartphones versus old flip phones. Like, it's just not a normal thing.
So an ideal scenario or an ideal setup for the constituent experience is, first question, do you love me? If the answer is yes, then how do you want to love me? And then we
Yeah.
give them the tools that allow them to love us. And then currently, what is the problem is that we don't know who's going to support a content creator because we're not structured to simply say yes to content creators. Is that true?
Oh yeah. I mean, for the first, I'd say 6 years of Tiltify, I would have to call charities on behalf of usually larger creators at the time, but to say like, so-and-so wants to fundraise on our platform for you. Can you sign up so that they could do that? And some people said no. And then those people would go raise money for another charity.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
So yeah, that would happen. That happened a lot early on, with even some like very notable people, because people didn't know who they were. Obviously, I mean,
Right.
they were notable to me, but they weren't notable, obviously, to whoever I was talking to.
So they're clearly our small donors in decline in nonprofit fundraising as an industry. Do you think that one of the reasons it's in decline, well, I think one of the reasons it's in decline is because we don't establish and support community for our constituents. And it sounds like what you're saying is that here is this beautiful community opportunity for us to tap into communities, and we're just not doing it because we're just not prepared to do it. We're not prepared to let that 26-year-old over there who knows content creation and live stream and gaming, that space, to come into the other spaces, which is
Correct.
your
Yeah.
argument is like they should be in every space.
Also thinking of the next 10 years. I mean, when we started this, a lot of the people that use Tiltify were 25, now they're 35. In 10 more years, they'll be 45. They still fundraise in that style, and now they have more money. It's just, it's a whole different generation of people. And it's, to me, it's, I mean, I don't mean this in like a super negative way, but I think it's like a decent example as I can think of. You know, for many, many years, I begged the Relay for Life team to do something with us, so that I was literally getting dozens and dozens and dozens of emails because it was a really popular program. This is like 2016, 2017.
Right.
Never happened. And obviously, look, I don't know that would have saved Relay for Life. You know, it obviously went on a huge decline. But to me, that's a prime example of not adapting, of declining people who are interested in you, not seeing the opportunity, and not going forward because, I don't know. One of the comments I used to get a lot was older people won't understand the technology, which I think is a red herring of an argument, because I don't know anybody, including, my dad's about to turn 80.
Yeah.
He has a smartphone. He uses WhatsApp. He FaceTimes.
Yeah.
They all use streaming services. They use, older people use telemedicine. They're on social media. That's just, that's kind of a made up excuse, I find.
I think you're right. Okay. Carrie, hi, Carrie, has a question. Are there any organizations doing better than others breaking down these internal barriers?
Definitely few and far between. St. Jude is one of the ones who are better at it recently, but we've had a lot of deep meetings with larger departments. Obviously, they're an incredibly large organization, but they're really pushing and advocating a lot to other departments to incorporate more. They've done a better job than others of starting to get more of the pieces in. Still not at the level that we're talking about. Nobody does it at the level that we're talking about. Nobody has a fluid, just because I think structurally it would have to be a small organization that could do it. None of the major ones are set up to allow for it.
When you really got to do a big budget change, you don't tweak the old budget. You go to zero-based budgeting, where you start at zero. You wipe everything and start over. Is that what we need?
I think to a certain extent, yeah. I think the silos and the structure of the flow of revenue in an organization needs to be updated. Like you said, it's like it's what did you say? It was 1990,
1989 to be exact is when I entered the market. Yeah.
I think it just needs to be updated also so that people aren't competing with each other when as a whole you're all trying, like the goal is to raise money for the charity. The goal is to raise as much money as possible. And a lot of people have resources. Like one of the things that I always thought was shocking when we first started, and obviously we're working with creators, influencers, people that are adept at social media. I found it shocking. For years, I would ask the people I was dealing with in the gaming live stream department, have you talked to the social media department? And they go, oh, we don't work with them.
Oh my God.
Like I always found that very shocking of like, how are you not working, or we're not allowed to talk about XYZ on our social channel, or we can't thank donors because our main social channel is for XYZ. So even things that to me are so naturally, married, are still off. So I think that tells me that there's just such a big structural change in what goes where, that the order is off. The order is off, and people need to work together, because the social team probably has valuable information, again, to talk to every team because everybody's on social. Then you have the people with content creators that some of them are being laid off because their department is so specific that the people that would even fundraise under them are choosing to fundraise in a different way. So it makes it seem like they're ineffective, whereas that money is just going into somebody else's bucket.
Yeah. Speaking of buckets, Lawrence has a question I want you to address. It's on screen now. He's responding to something that we said. It should land in, I was talking about the board member fundraising, content creation fundraising, should land in the peer-to-peer bucket, not in something even larger, ? Clearly, we need to source our donations so we can measure how we're doing. Can you respond to that with an idea? Not that we expect you to have all the answers, because I think what we're talking about is a worldview shift here, which won't be easy. And there are people on this call.
It could be larger. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be larger, much larger.
I would say at the peer-to-peer level, at least, to allow for people not to compete over peer-to-peer. But yeah, certainly that could be just in overall revenue budget. I mean, there's so many examples. I mean, I can certainly spit off a couple examples that might not be considered peer-to-peer, that is creator and influencer fundraising, that would potentially be outside of then that peer-to-peer bucket, which causes another problem, right? Because what happens when a creator does something that's not necessarily a peer-to-peer opportunity? It potentially could be. It potentially should be more of a top-level revenue bucket.
Let me give you a crazy example. So I recently became president of a small nonprofit here in Virginia, and one of the program activities that we run, it's an ARC chapter, is a thrift store. Got this great email from a new volunteer who said, hey, I'm a micro influencer in the Richmond area. And I have this, fascination with thrift stores. Can I become a volunteer? I'm like, girl, I will put you in charge of social media today. So I did. Yeah. And her production 2 weeks in, because she's the only variable that we can see, is that our store sales from one Saturday to the next Saturday almost doubled. That's going to land in the retail sales category, not anywhere else, but we know where it went. So Lawrence, to your point, we got to figure out how to measure it, but we still got to do it. And we may have to do it before we can figure that out.
Well, to complicate it even more, but to give credence to Lawrence's point, right? Again, you're building relationships with content creators. What about the non-fundraising opportunities as they become supporters of you, where they help you create content, right? And that content drives fundraising to other places. Where does that go?
Yeah. So it's like a sea change. All right. Got another question from Kim, very specific to Tiltify. Do you have any advice for a nonprofit new to Tiltify and live stream fundraising in general? that is planning outreach to creators for the first time. Can I ask you to do two things in this response, Michael? Can I ask you to, number one, answer the question, but number two, differentiate about live stream fundraising versus content creation, if you would?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Kim. So I would say two things, obviously not fully understanding the context of the question. One, I would say, don't focus on live stream fundraising. And by meaning that, by saying that, I mean, much like we're talking about here, and we're saying the word content creator a lot or influencer a lot, live stream fundraising is a subset of something that people do who create content. So my first piece of advice would be, don't focus on live stream fundraisers. Know that live streaming is a tool that creators may use, and you want them to have the opportunity to use that. Second, I would say, when you outreach to creators, again, to sort of add to this point, I would look at the programs that you have and the programs that you're running, and not necessarily create a new program for creators and necessarily reach out to creators one by one, but to find a way to add the opportunity for people that are creators to support your program and market or advertise that opportunity to people on, like, YouTube. If you were starting, I would focus on places like YouTube or Twitch. Those are the two places where you're going to get the most bang for your buck from a creator standpoint. So I would say, make sure that your program is accessible, and make sure that your program isn't just like, I can't sort of make this point enough, especially in the last year as I've seen this shift. The purpose of the program should not be, this is where creators or live streamers or gamers go. Like that's not a program. That's a tool that people are using. And it's not interesting for creators to be asked to do what they do for a program that is literally just about doing that. There's no challenge, right? Most of us know that programs that are successful are built around some sort of exciting goal or challenge or group effort. I see a lot of programs, especially the ones that are specific to live streamers, are devoid of that. And that's also why a lot of creators are moving to other programs, because they want to create interesting content. They already create the content that they make. Give them an opportunity to create content that they don't make.
So I have a question, and if you don't want me to put your name on screen, just say, for God's sakes, Katrina, don't put my name on screen in the chat. I won't. But to Michael's point, live stream is hard. Live stream is risky. It's much more comfortable for me to pre-record, edit, take all the stupid stuff out that I just said, and then produce. And I think everybody's like that. And I'm probably more comfortable with live stream and looking stupid than most people are, because I've practiced a lot, both those things. But here's my question. I know that we have a bunch of innovators on the call. My question to you is this: how would you approach this restructure as an innovation project? Just, nobody's going to hold you to it, but how would you approach restructuring the revenue department? I think we've made a good argument that it's got to be done, and that maybe here are some ways to think about it. But if you had this as a client, as a project, what would be your top three things or first three things that you would do? Carrie, I know that you are an innovator by trade. I'm hoping Meredith Reagan is on the call as well. And I think I saw a couple of other people with innovation in their titles. So if you have a thought, I would love to get that from you. Okay. So Michael, I'm trying to look through my stuff. What have I not probed your brain on yet? Okay, I got one. So the traditional walk environment, I think they still by and large consider themselves offline in real life. And if you're online and you're traditional peer-to-peer, we call you DIY, right? That's sort of the thing. Those feel like false segmentations to me now, because nothing is purely offline. What is that tension? And is there a tension between online communities and offline communities in regard to a traditional walk environment? I'm not sure I'm articulating my question very well, but I just don't see how we can differentiate the two anymore. DIY versus a legacy peer-to-peer program feels like online versus offline these days. Am I crazy?
I do think that happens, and I think it's sort of a false separation, because obviously for most walks, cycling events, other other events that have an in-person element, their fundraising takes place online. For most of those events, the fundraising takes place before the actual event even happens. And the event is typically the culmination of the event itself, right? Like most people raise money for their walk, leading up to the walk, and then do the walk. So it's the exact same as online fundraising, and why there's such a great opportunity to get more people involved, because also a lot of people want to participate in things but are stronger at the online fundraising portion. And to go back to your recorded comment as well, just to touch on that, yeah, a lot of that's the other part that people miss. And when we're talking about content creation, the reason why I sort of point out not to focus on live stream is, again, because you have a lot of people that will create recorded content. And again, a lot of the programs that are around live streaming exclude those people, which are the majority of the people, by the way. The majority of the people don't live stream. The minority live stream. The majority create recorded content. So by focusing purely on live stream, you're also taking all the recorded content people out of the equation, which is about 150 million people, probably more. So, you really have to look at that wide net.
So, Michael, can you hit those numbers real quick? Because I don't know if we articulated them earlier clearly enough. Like, how big a part of the American population are content creators, small level content creators?
I mean, small level content creators. So, people that have a following and create content. I mean, you're probably looking at least a third of the population.
Wow.
So, what is that? 100 million?
That's amazing. And so what we're saying is that our content creators already exist in all our programs and all our mission programs and all our boards. They are the people now.
Yeah.
It is more common to be a content creator than to not be. Is that maybe too far, but close?
I would say it is more common to have a presence and some sort of following on social media than not.
Okay. So the way we're approaching this is,
I mean, 98% of people in the US are on social media. So
yeah. All right. Okay. I didn't hook any of my innovators with like, this is what I would do, but I will be coming after you because somebody's got to figure this out, and you are the people.
Yeah. I wish I had a solid answer, but it's definitely above me. And obviously I don't work for a charity directly, but I just continue to feel like the opportunity is huge. We continue to grow. We continue to hear from frustrated fundraisers, and we continue to get pitched. I mean, I got an email as recently as an hour and a half ago from a major influencer who's like, I need to do something. What should I do? And the reason why I get asked that is because the opportunities they're exposed to are so limited for what they can do. So a lot of them just end up asking us what they can do and ask us to make suggestions.
So is that an indicator that
limited?
Is that an indicator that in the way that we've structured our outreach to high level influencers is so singular and trudging that we're not getting around to them? We're not treating them in a scalable fashion?
Definitely not treating them in a scalable fashion, for sure. They're definitely being put in a bucket. And the ask to them is just, X amount of times a year, can you stream for me to raise money? Can you stream for me to raise money? Can you stream for me to raise money? Thank you. Whereas like the value of those communities is so much greater than that. And that goes back to some of the individuals that have been hired over the years to do this and there's so many people out there that are experts in this community space that I feel like charities need to even readjust how they hire a community expert. And like you said, how fluid that person's input is across multiple departments.
Yeah. Yeah. So the difference that we're talking about, if we get to where we want, I'm an advocate for zero-based department structure. Start with nothing, bring in people who know nothing because they have no iron in the fire, and restructure that way. But let's assume that we went from recruiting, ladies who look a lot like me, but are wearing a pink jumpsuit, pantsuit, tracksuit, to go out and be a team captain at a local walk on a track. What we're transitioning to, well, what they're transitioning to, and we're trying to keep up, is now I am leveraging my audience that I've developed around my gardening and my mushroom growing to support me in my support of Planned Parenthood. I mean, that's the transition that we're talking about, right? That we are not
Yeah.
currently structured to acknowledge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it's just like, I can't underestimate the opportunity that's available because of what we see consistently, and how many charities are just simply not taking advantage of the opportunity. I mean, and I can even list, off the top of my head, a half a dozen, community geniuses that are, around, that have worked for charities and have been siloed in departments, or even like recently let go because that department, wasn't doing the leverage because they were sort of hamstrung in what they were doing, or people they were reaching out to were, fundraising, but that money was going to other buckets in the department, so they didn't get credit for it.
Yeah.
Whereas they could have been making much larger opportunities.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much. Everyone, this is going to be, because it's going to be edited and all the stupid stuff taken out and then released as a podcast, because that's what almost everyone does. You're just the lucky few who get to experience all the mistakes and all the things in Livestream. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest. And if you have ideas around this, we want to hear from you. Michael, any last words?
I would say, this is very much, like you said, an open conversation. I think what I was excited about this webinar is, I don't know the answer. I just know that there's a huge opportunity and a barrier. And I think what's cool about all the people on this call and some of the discussion I'm seeing is it's about trying to figure out as a group how we solve this, so that, because I think, especially now in 2023 and 2024, low dollar fundraising, the drop in low dollar fundraising is a little bit superficial based on the strategy that's employed. Like an example of that, just as a final thought, is when I started Tiltify, I was a charity consultant, and a lot of people used to ask me, how do I get younger donors or younger fundraisers? And I used to ask them, do you think you don't because they don't want to fundraise for you, or do you think you don't because you only market to older people? And I think that's a little bit of what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
You're not getting influencers and creators to fundraise for you, I think, because they don't want to. They're not, because you're not allowing them to.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Michael, thank you so much. We will have Michael and Adrian O'Flynn at one of our convenings in October. That convening is full, unfortunately, but you can hit our convening page. There'll be a link in the show notes about that. We are going to continue this conversation until we fix this damn thing. So we hope you'll join us and help us fix it. Thanks a bunch, guys. Talk to you soon. Michael.
Thank you.